家好，我的名字是施愿意，我今天在 Georgia Strait 报纸。Hello, my name is Michelle De Silva, and I'm here at the Georgia Strait newspaper with editor Charlie Smith. Good morning, Charlie.
Shishi, now I'm going to switch into Cantonese, and I'm going to say I'm here with Michelle De Silva. Singmo Loijai.
Thank you, Charlie. So this week's Georgia Strait cover story deals with health, and we've got large coverage on health stories. Charlie, you wrote an article about toxins and how that relates to health. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I found this very fascinating. Actually, my interest in this area originated back in 1998 when I went to the Vancouver Public Library. And there was a speaker named Pete Myers came, and he was a co-author of a book called Your Stolen Future. And he gave this compelling talk about 70,000 synthetically produced chemicals had been created in the 20th century. And they were showing up in people's bloodstreams. And so if you went back to the 19th century, people's bloodstreams might have 200 chemicals or something like that, but now it's gone up. And so that piqued my interest, and some of these chemicals are like the phthalates, which is when you're in a new car and you smell the new car smell. That these are chemicals that can be harmful. So if you have a new car, you should be driving with the windows open a lot. Yeah, and people don't realize that. Other chemicals, triclosan is one that's in antibacterial soap, in toothpaste, shampoos. It's in 1,600 household products. Now there are some health concerns being raised about that. And so it's in very tiny writing on the packages, but when you're shopping in the grocery store, you can actually look. So there's numerous chemicals. Another one are PDBEs, they're called, and they are in furniture, upholstery, in new cars, in carpets. And these are flame retardants. So if your house catches on fire, your couch won't burn as quickly. But the problem is that they also, in infants and children, have been associated with lower IQs. So, there was a study that was recently published. One of the co-authors is Bruce Lamphir from SFU Health Sciences, and it showed that the average IQ scores was 5 points lower with exposure, and they had the other issue too is it's associated with ADHD. So you've got the attention deficit disorder being linked to these chemicals because that's the effect that they have on the brain, and particularly the prefrontal cortex. It's the part right here at the front, which is the decision making, and it can interfere with the dopamine, which is a neurotransmitter that's linked to pleasure and reward centers. It's very complicated, it's technical, but I find it very interesting, and it's an emerging area of science.
You also talked to some researchers about metals and how those can be dangerous as well, right?
Yeah, this is a key thing, and Bruce Lamphir is one of them. The metals people were aware of for a longer period of time, particularly lead in children, so they removed the lead from the gasoline, but in some countries in the world there's still leaded gasoline. Another one is mercury, which bioaccumulates, particularly in fish. So when you have tuna, which is higher, because usually when you eat a tuna, it's a big fish. It's eaten a lot of fish along the way, and it's older. So you'll have less mercury in salmon than you will in tuna, because salmon, they have shorter lifespans, and they're not consuming as much mercury-laden products in the ocean. Another one is arsenic. And so arsenic levels can build up. We just had a mining disaster in British Columbia where there was release of cadmium, which is another metal that can be. So some of these metals, they can break the blood-brain barrier so they can go through the bloodstream and then into the brain. And that's where the problem is with mercury. Aluminum has also been associated with memory loss, but it's also an important nutrient as well. So it's complicated because some of these products, not lead, but you want some, but others in too great an amount, and particularly in children, where their brains are growing and their dopamine receptor, their synapses are developing, and their dopamine is that it can interfere with that, and that can have lifelong implications, and also even contribute to addiction in adulthood.
Wow, so there's a lot of research going on, and it sounds like there's a lot in this article itself. What is the take-home message? What can people do right now?
I think the message is you can actually do something about your toxic loads. And naturopathic doctors, this is an area that they specialize in quite often in terms of how do you reduce it. You can test your levels through blood, through urine tests, and also even through sweat and through hair samples. So a naturopath might take the hair sample, do a preliminary test, and look at your levels, and if you've accumulated mercury, for instance. And then they may go to the next step and then test your blood. Well, how do you get rid of it? One of the things is many of these toxins will build up in fat cells. So they're stored in the fat cells. So if you lose weight, you can actually get rid of some of the toxins. Another thing is sweating. There's bisphenol A is in plastics, in plastic bottles, and it's been banned. It's a very problematic toxin, synthetically produced chemical. And so that actually happens to go out more in the sweat. But then the parabens, which are in deodorants, that they're more prone to be urinated out. So it's sauna therapy is something you can do to help rid yourself of toxins. At a more serious, and this should be done with medical supervision, you can, chelation is something where these chelating agents are injected into the blood, or you can take them orally. And what they do is they bind to heavy metals and actually flush them out of your system. So if somebody does have mercury poisoning, or somebody has high levels of lead, that arsenic, it'll pull it out. The problem is chelation can also pull out essential nutrients like calcium, sodium, because it will bind to minerals too. So it has to be done with caution, with lots of supervision, and with supplements to ensure that those essential nutrients that you're losing, you're replacing. But so there are things you can do. Another area is you can take certain supplements that might facilitate or improve the activity of the main organs internally that deal with removing toxins in the process. And that's the kidney and the liver are two in particular. I would recommend avoiding alcohol. That's something I avoid because I don't want to interfere with my liver. And the liver is central in terms of clearing out toxins. So there are some things to do, and that's the take-home message that I have from that story.
Wow, well, there's lots to take in. If you'd like to read more about this topic, you can find Charlie's story in this week's issue of the Georgia Straight. You can also find it online at www.straight.com. Charlie, another story that you wrote about this week has to do with mountain biking, right? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, we had, it's called the Crankworks Festival at Whistler, and it's these crazy mountain bikers who do these wild things, like they jump in the air 40 feet going over jumps, and that's the slope style is the thing that's emerged. Well, one of the legends of slope style actually comes from Vancouver Island, Darren Barraclough. So I was able to interview Darren before he went up to Whistler for Crankworks, and there's a Red Bull event at Crankworks as well, so he's sponsored by Red Bull. And then a downhill racer named Stevie Smith. So they were talking to me about the fitness, that they're actually very keen. Darren in particular is really living a clean life, and he has these bad accidents, like he's broken his back. He's had a herniated disc. He shattered his big toe. These are all in the past 3 years. And he was on his bike 3 weeks after shattering his toe, and he was saying that was because of his fitness regimen. And he believes in when you eat healthy, he avoids the middle of grocery stores. He only goes around the outside of grocery stores because he thinks that's where the healthy food is. And he eats organic, but he says if you're eating well and you're taking the proper nutrients, you also want to keep your blood level up, your heart rate up, because that'll pump the blood through the system and get to the organs that need the help. So I was speaking to them, and I said to Darren, I said, you watch the video of this guy, and it's incredible. It's literally insane. So I said, do you ever feel fear when you're doing the jumps? And he says, of course I feel fear. If you don't feel fear, but what's happened is the younger people are getting into it. So he's 32, so he's the grand old man of this. And he's going against people who are half his age, 16-year-old kids who don't feel fear. And we started talking about the prefrontal cortex of the brain, which is the decision making. It actually doesn't mature in males until they're about 25. So you've got these kids doing these crazy things without the proper judgment. But once he's at that age, he feels the fear because he understands. So I had a lot of fun speaking with the two of them.
Fun. So there's a festival going on as well as a competition, is that right?
Yeah, it's a big deal at Whistler. One of the things Whistler has done very well is become a 4-season resort. And you can see others like Sun Peaks trying to replicate that, where in the old days, Whistler was a ski resort in the winter and it was dead in the summer. But they've been adding more and more events, but one of the centerpieces is the Crankworks Festival.
And I hear that actually BC is kind of a capital for mountain biking. Is that right?
Yeah, it's partly the terrain because we've got the mountains and the long periods without snow. So, the riders in places like Saskatchewan, they just don't have the same opportunities. But certainly in BC and Vancouver Island too. I grew up on Vancouver Island. There's lots of available land. So these guys like Stevie also grew up. He was born in Cassidy and Darren is from Parksville. And so they can find this vacant land, they can create jumps, they can do all these wild things, and it's not as difficult. Although now what's happening is they've got these foam pits that they've created that the newer jumpers, that they can practice a jump 1,000 times and they're not landing on dirt, they're landing on foam pits, so you don't get as injured. So. But Darren was one of the older guys who grew up landing in the dirt again and again and again.
So he's used to the danger factor,
Yeah.
I guess. Charlie, I know that you're an avid road cyclist. Have you tried mountain biking, or are you planning on trying mountain biking up in Whistler?
No, I have a hybrid bike, but I stick to the roads. Very rarely do I have actually. I'm not. I don't want to get injured. I need these fingers for typing.
And your front cortex, right?
Yeah,
as
I
well?
need my prefrontal cortex.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like a fun story. You can find that story as well in print in this week's edition of the Georgia Straight, as well as online at www.straight.com.